Order of operations with absolute values. So absolute values work just like parentheses, but they make the final number inside positive after it's been calculated. So let's look at example 1 to see how we can do this. So since absolute values are like parentheses, we have to remember our little saying that there's parentheses, which is for please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So absolute values fall along the lines of parentheses. So we address that first. And then when we address what's inside the absolute value, we need to also look back at this to determine what we do next. So there's no other absolute values inside. So then we can move on from parentheses to exponents. And we can see that there's an exponent in this problem. So we will have to address that first. So let's go ahead and write the next step. So we go 4 minus 3 with the absolute value of 7 minus, and we remember that exponents are just repeated multiplication. So we would just multiply this 4 times 4. Remember, exponents only affect what they are directly next to. So there's no parentheses to include that negative sign. So it's just the 4 that it affects. So we would have 4 times 4, which is equal to 16. So we would say, well, let's just change this into 4 minus 3, absolute value sign, 7 minus 16. And then we close the absolute value. So then the next step would be to subtract what's inside this absolute value sign. So the first thing we need to do is we take the 16 and then we can subtract the 7. This is a little bit easier to do. So 16 minus 7 is equal to 9. But that negative sign is the larger, attached to the larger number. So this is negative 9. So then this problem then becomes 4 minus 3. Then the absolute value, we have negative 9. Now, anything inside that absolute value becomes positive. So that negative 9 actually then becomes positive. So let's rewrite this all. So now we have 4 minus 3, and then we can just write it like that. And let's just really emphasize that it's positive now. So we can just put that in parentheses. So now we have dealt with our parentheses, and then we look to see what's next. We don't have any exponents left. The next step will be to multiply and divide. We can see that this is a multiplication that we need to address next. So we have 3 times 9. So this 3 is attached to a negative. So we have one negative times a positive. So that's going to make it negative 27. So now we have 4 minus 27. And so now our final step will be to do this subtraction. And we'll just do it right here. So we have 27 minus 4. 7 minus 4 is 3, and then we have the 2. And because the 27 is larger than the 4, we keep the sign of the larger number. So our solution will be 23. So let's look at another example. Example 2, solve for the following. So here we have a problem, and let's go ahead and write parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add it, and subtract. So the first thing we need to do is deal with the parentheses. So let's deal with this one, because absolute values act like parentheses. So we have a 3 that's attached to this 2. And it doesn't include the negative sign because there's not parentheses around the negative 2. So it's just attached to the 2. So what we have this negative sign right there, and we have 2 times 2 times 2, and the absolute value sign. Then we have plus, and then this 45 plus negative 56 can just be written like this. 45 minus 56, close that, and then we have 5 raised to the second power. So let's first do this. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So this becomes negative 8. And then we'll deal with this parentheses. So now we have 56 minus 45. 6 minus 5 is 1. 5 minus 4 is 1. So 56 is larger than this 45. So we're going to take the sign of the 56, which is negative. So here we have negative 11 inside an absolute value sign. And we have that. So the next step will be is to make anything inside these absolute value signs here into positive. So let's do the first one. So negative 8 becomes positive 8 plus, and now the second absolute value becomes positive 11. And then we have 5 raised to the second power. So now we've dealt with that first step of parentheses, and the next thing we do is look at exponents. And we see we have an exponent here. And notice again, this 2 is only attached to the number, not the negative sign. So we only need to then multiply out. So what we have is this plus 8 plus 11, and we have minus 5 times 5. So here we have 8. We'll just drop that first positive sign. 8 plus 11 minus, so 5 times 5 is 25. Now, our final step will be just to add and subtract these numbers together. And this is the final step. So we can do it in either order. So what I would probably do is I would just add these two first. So 8 plus 11 is 19, and then we're going to go minus 25. And this is equal to negative 6. And if you need to re-look at this, so you can go 25 minus 19. We'll have to borrow 15 minus 9 is 6. 1 minus 1 is 0. And we take the sign of the larger number, so it's negative. And so let's do one more example. Here we have our next problem. So we have parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract. So the first thing we need to deal with is parentheses. We look at this absolute value and see that we need to address that first. So here we have 2 minus, so inside the absolute value sign. So we have that negative sign. It's not attached to the exponent as it's not included in a parentheses with the 4. So it's just 4 times 4. Now this can be written as 2 minus, so now we have 4 times 4 is 16. So now we have negative 16. Then anything inside the absolute value sign becomes positive. So the next step will be to have 2 minus, and that becomes positive 16. So now we have 2 minus 16. And 2 minus 16 is equal to negative 14. And you can see that is our solution to this problem.